Hello and welcome to my channel, Enjoy Watercolour Painting. Today I'm not downstairs in the gallery, I'm up here in my apartment. It's quite a gloomy day, there's not much light, so I thought I'll sit by the window seat, on the window seat here, looking out over the little town and explain our subject for today, which is all about brush strokes and going with the flow, because that's what we do with watercolours. It's always the water that helps us. We go with the flow of water. I'm using for my subject this sunburst picture, and I have 4 brushes that I'm going to use in this process, and I'm going to explain step by step how we create the different effects that we have here to produce this image. All these 4 brushes have their part to play, and we will use them in different ways, but it's always the water that will help us out to help to create that effect. So stay with me for another watercolour adventure. Let's paint. Now this video is speeded up 4 times so that it doesn't become too tedious, and we're focusing on the brushwork. And to begin with, I'm wetting the, this is Arch watercolour board. Wet it profusely with a large mop brush, size 10 mop brush. And now I'm adding my really hot palettes of orange, transparent orange and transparent yellow with a mix of Payne's Grey and Indian Red. That you can see that I've masked an area just offset to the left, which is the sun for our sunburst. And so I've added the yellow, then the orange consecutively around it. Now I'm using the flat acrylic brush with a ruler, which removes the colour very precisely and works well with the ruler because it's a short flat and you get this angle created by the ruler, taking out the sunbursts. This is a really useful brush for moving and removing watercolour, and this is its main function. I use it a lot, well, we use it a lot in the gallery, and you will see it being used several times during the course of this painting. You can always use it as well independently of the ruler if you've got a steady enough hand to do the lines fairly straight. And I'm also using it now to create the line of a tree which is going to be silhouetted against the sunburst. Rather than a pencil line, it works better. The brush we've transferred to now is a 0 liner brush. A liner brush will carry more paint than an ordinary 0 fine brush. And you can see that I'm putting in the shape of this very tall pine tree just by adding colour on the right hand side and then using water to spread the colour. This fine liner works really well for this process because the longer bristles carry more paint, and you can use it for delicate work and for other effects, as you will see as we go through the painting. Don't be tempted to skip through this. It's only a short video. I think the whole thing is 12 minutes. Because I've tried to pack in as many techniques as I can, and if you skip through, you'll miss some, which is a shame. I'm defining the little branches that come off the main tree, and now again we are back with our acrylic flat, coming into its own again and defining the trees that are further away. The fine liner comes back in with paint, carrying enough paint to add to just one side, the right hand side, of the trees, and then just move it across with water. So we add the paint in this technique and then move it with water, and so therefore you get areas which are more intensely coloured and areas which are lighter, which gives you a more natural look. And of course, because the fine liner has such a point, an exact point, we can indicate or suggest the branches of these trees too, which is very effective. But I'm not needing to replenish the brush much. Now we've transferred to a mid-sized mop brush, which will hold a lot of paint, and we're going to emphasize the shady areas between the sunbursts, first of all by adding a dilute mix of Payne's grey and Indian red, and then using the liner to actually spot in colour. Now, when you use a liner to spot in the colour, most of the colour release is when you touch the paper and then withdraw the brush and the colour is left on the paper. And this is a very good technique to use on damp paper, which we are doing here, to give a blended effect which still has some structure to it. We can always again redefine those sunbursts if they get a little bit too static and a little bit too just too strong in a way. Again, the fine liner comes into its own, and you just let the brush skip across the paper, just dance across the paper, using a mix of the palettes which I have, burnt sienna, Payne's grey. But the fine liner can also be used on dry paper and with the side of the brush to give a dry brush effect, just catching the tops of the texture of the paper. And this board, by the way, is fine grain, so it doesn't have a great deal of texture to it. But the liner brush will create the effect of leaves, and you can then add water to it to soften certain areas if you wish, and then dot more colour in. This zero liner is easy to use. If you get a larger sized liner, 1 or 2, the bristles are longer and harder to control. So I do suggest that you start off with a zero liner. We're back to the medium mop brush now, and adding water to soften certain areas. There's more shading down this end of the painting, and so we're going to wet the area and add colour so it runs. It does its own thing. Again, it's the flow of the water we're using to help us to create the effect. But the mop brush also can spot colour in, and it's really good when the paper is wet, as it is here. And I've got a mix of Payne's grey and burnt sienna, using separately to give that appearance of the leaves and the foliage of the tree. And it can also be used to help to define the sunburst too. When you apply paint and you have an area which is dry and you want a soft edge, take the water to meet the paint. Don't be tempted to take the paint to meet the water. Let the water meet the paint and do its own thing. The liner brush again now, and I want to give some detail of the leaves just dotted about. The paper is now dry, and so the paint's going nowhere, just staying where I put it. If it becomes too harsh an effect, I can always add a little bit of water to let the colour run in. But again, I'm putting the water by the side of the paint and then just touching the paint so the water runs in, not taking the paint to the water. Part of this picture now is still damp, and this is a lovely time to add some detail, again using that zero liner. And all this extra detail and extra shading helps to emphasize that sunburst. And finally, we've taken off the masking fluid, which was the sun, and I'm adding with the liner, just a halo of Scarlet Lake and just washing it into the surrounding yellow just to give that extra contrast. And for the moment, apart from a little bit more emphasis of the rays of the sun, I think we're there. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my video and it's given you the inspiration to try some of the different techniques we used to create our sunburst. It certainly brightened up my day too. And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave any comments you may have or suggestions for future videos. I really appreciate your input. It's very important to me. So watch out for the next one. Until the next time, happy painting. Bye.